Susan Reardon. I'm the staff hearing officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, July 28th to order. Today we have 3 items on the agenda, and I haven't received any requests for continuances or withdrawals, so we'll hear them in the order they appear. Under announcements and appeals, on July 15th, the Planning Commission upheld a decision of the staff hearing officer on a project located at 512 Bath Street. It was an affordable housing project that was asking for some modifications, and the Planning Commission liaison actually suspended the decision, and it was heard before the Planning Commission, and they upheld it and required the project to be moved, or to move 5 feet further away from Mission Creek to increase the setback. I don't have any other announcements or appeals. No? Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on items not on today's agenda? No, seeing no one, we'll move to the first item, which is 2010 Emerson, if the applicant would like to come up. And this item actually has been continued, or was continued from June 30th of this year.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just as a reminder, it's about an 8,700 square foot single family developed lot, residence here. It's got Emerson Avenue here and Cleveland up at the top. Some as-built alterations required modification to legalize. The main ones that you spoke on were, or the 3 that you spoke on, were was it identified? A front dormer? Gable.
Yeah, gable.
A front gable here actually increased the roof by about 6 inches within the interior yard setback. And the addition here of a dormer actually had some minor solar access height limitation issues, but they did qualify for the criteria for modification approval. We also didn't really have an issue with this, but you asked them about the front yard parking. Historically, the site has provided no parking legally, but a circular driveway here in the front has provided parking for 1 or 2 vehicles for as long as the records show. The applicant was hoping to legalize this situation. Your discussion determined that there was probably too much paving here, that the driveway here that also provides access for parking for an adjacent neighbor was adequate to provide 1 parking space, but that the applicant was directed to go back, restudy the parking, reduce the paving, and screen it. The applicant has appeared before the Single Family Design Board on July 19th, and they gave comments to several designs. We have 5 designs here that the applicant has provided for your review today. Just briefly, the 5 designs consist of 1 uncovered space here, pulling straight in off the street. The second one, pretty much where the parking currently is occurring, but removal of the remaining parking and driveway and curb cut from this area. Option 3 provides 2 uncovered parking spaces. It would require 2 driveways to be maintained, but does bring parking on site up to 2 spaces, 1 garage backing straight out on the street. This driveway would still be preserved because, again, it does provide parking to the adjacent neighbor. Or here, a garage and an open space in these locations, providing 2 spaces on site. Staff, like the Design Review Board, is recommending that you consider option number 2, which is 1 uncovered space. It would allow a turnaround, even though the ordinance allows backing out on the street, possibly could allow a turnaround for a forward exit, which would be a safety improvement. The street is dangerously narrow. And then planting this area and removing the curb cut and driveway to reinstate 1 parking space on the street. So staff is going with this recommendation and feels that that would be an improvement over the existing situation, which is no legal parking on site, provides 1, gets it off the street in an area that would be screened from the public view by an enhanced landscape plan.
Okay, great. Thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and add any additional comments?
Mark Mirando, agent for the owner.
I'm Brad Simon, the owner, and I just had the plants that we were going to recommend for screening. If that's if you're interested in that, it's a Pittosporum Tenoflorium Kahua. or you may pronounce it however you wish. And it's sort of a nice smaller leaf that would sort of,
I think the landscaping will be both Single-Family Design Board and Transportation's review. We want to make sure that it doesn't block visibility, although it is a one-way street. So the visibility would not be obstructed from the oncoming cars. We want to make sure the pedestrian safety is not affected by the proposed landscaping.
Well, and also within 10 feet of the front property line along the driveway, it's limited to 3.5 feet. So I'm glad you brought some suggestions regarding landscaping, because that was one of my concerns, not only using the whole front yard setback for paving, parking, cars, and all that, but also the limited areas available for landscaping and screening of the car. So, did you have anything you wanted to add, Mark?
I believe the reason why we show the uncovered space here is because it's the only place on the lot where we could begin to conform the most. We're 3 feet from the side property line, and we're just outside of the 15-foot setback, but since it is uncovered, it still needs a mod to be in the front yard. And the same with this one. Since it's in the front yard, but it is within the front yard setback, then it still requires a mod. We looked at conforming options originally, and we just came in the last meeting with what was existing in historic. But as we looked further up the lot, the slope is 18% behind the house, and then it goes from 28, 29 back to like 24 up here. So it doesn't really conform to the parking standards and parking design standards. So that's why we just did all the proposals at the front yard, and there's also a storm drain issue up here on this on the driveway. That's an unpermitted storm drain without an easement. So there's basically we just kept the parking to the front due to that fact.
Okay. I'd like to open the public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 2010 Emerson?
Okay, we've received, you have two, and I think you have both of those.
Yeah, I've received a couple emails from a neighbor, Jonathan Leach, expressing concern. I have 3 emails expressing concern with the project. One's July 19th. Another one is July 16th, and then the most recent one the other day, July 21st. And this was following the Single-Family Design Board meeting. And he still has concerns with the project, but states that if it's not feasible to provide the parking to the rear, that this one, option 2 noted on your plan was the one. He calls it option A, because I guess that's what it was called out at Single Family Design Board.
Correct.
Would be the most supportable. So I'll close the public hearing. I actually went back out to the site the other day to look at it again to get more of a feel for the neighborhood. I know I've reviewed a couple of projects on the street for front yard setback modifications in regards to garage locations. And I understand your reasonings for exploring the idea of a garage in the front, but I think for this site, it's not appropriate. If the garage were to be proposed, it should be tucked in the back of the site. So I understand why that was looked at and discarded. In regards to the different your different options, the option 2 would be the preferred option of all 5 of these. However, I think it would be best to tuck one in the back, but I understand the existing situation with the slope. Fire department wouldn't have an issue because they couldn't drive down the driveway anyways. They'd be doing a hose, and if it's more than 150 feet, then they would need the sprinklers. And so all those can be overcome. But given the slope of the land and the layout of the structure, I think option 2 with the reduced paving is supportable. Now, you had mentioned transportation staff had looked at, with the pop out of the pavement this way, is there adequate room to turn around and come out ahead?
Stacy, excuse me, Chelsea, you want to respond to that?
Chelsea Swanson with Transportation Planning. The turnaround provided is actually, you can't do it quite in one maneuver. You can back out to the street in one maneuver, but to turn around all the way, you probably have to do two. And that's just because of the angle of the approach onto the driveway. But we still support it because backing out is feasible, and you can turn around if you like. It's just not in the one maneuver. So.
Okay. Okay, that answers the question. And then for the applicant, this right here is a curb, right? I don't see a denotation.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's a sandstone curb.
Needs 6-inch stands. And then the curb cut's going to be removed?
Correct.
Restored to a curb, yes.
I mean, yeah, curb gutter. Is there sidewalks in this area?
There aren't sidewalks on the property frontage. There are adjacent, I believe, on both sides on the adjacent
Oh, on the
properties,
properties,
and then they kind of disappear uphill, and there's more sidewalk downhill. So with the removal of the curb cut, we'd recommend, if not sidewalks, some walkable surface, basically. I think it's in front of this property, it's flat.
Relatively flat for the sidewalk area.
Yeah, it's like landscaping, I believe, where there's not a curb cut. I think in between the two. So just
In this area?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, the last hearing, I indicated support for the other two modifications. I actually didn't approve them. I continued the whole project to here. So in the staff report that was written, or the memo for today, it just mentions the one, it just contains the one finding for the parking location in the setback. And so I can make the findings listed in both staff reports regarding the solar height modification request and the interior yard modification request, as well as the modification to permit parking within the setback, recognizing that this location would bring the project site more in conformance with the zoning ordinance. There's still one space short, but it brings closer to the requirements. And I would like to put two conditions on the project, which you said you've already doing. One is the removal of the curb cut at the western side of the property and replaced with city standard curb gutter and, if necessary, sidewalk. And that would be determined by Public Works on what exactly the standard is. And then just requiring that this curb be put in there just so that it would prohibit eventually over time the cars migrating up again and parking in this area. So some kind of barrier between the two.
Okay.
Things. And so that was my only condition. So I've approved the project, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they feel this warrants additional discussion before them, they can call it up during that same 10-day appeal period. And if that were to occur, Ms. Malaka would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Here's both of mine. Yeah. This is the old one. So you just throw it away if there's any one.
Put a big package together for your stamps.
Great, thanks. Anytime you're ready. Anytime.
Oh,
You're first.
good morning, Ms. Reardon. Danny Cotto, Senior Planner, and I'm the case planner for this project now. Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, the applicants had proposed this site plan here, which is, so here's, we're on 119 Skyline. Skyline circles here, and so south is this way, which means north is this way. Property lines are here. The dark green shows the area behind the 25-foot front setback. It is a little bit less than a 5,000 square foot lot, and it's in the E1 zone, which means it has normally a 30-foot front setback and 10-foot side and rear setbacks. But because the average slope of the first half of the lot is greater than 20%, they get a 5-foot break on the front setback, so that's 25 feet. What they had proposed last time was a building that met all setbacks, and they were proposing the open yard, several modifications. One was to allow the open yard to be in the front setback in this location, and then to have some overheight retaining walls. I think those are the two. And at that time, you probably remember, it's only a couple of weeks ago, you continued it because you felt like there wasn't enough open yard in the back. So the applicants have taken the 2-week continuance and thought about it, done a little bit of redesigning, and I'm actually going to, well, I'll show you what they've submitted as a proposal. Now, just to be sure that you understand, the old, or the previous building was set right at the 10-foot setback. That line goes here, but right at this corner it was exactly 10 foot back, and it went straight across like that. What they propose is to shift the entire building forward about 2 feet. So you can see here's that same setback line here, but now there's a gap here, and that's about a 2-foot gap. The whole building moves forward about 2 feet, and in doing so, the front corner of the garage and the, I guess it's a bedroom or a storage room up front, gets pushed into the front setback. And
Actually, the garage does not. Just this overhang of that.
Oh, because the garage is back a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ground floor level, we'll call it, gets pushed into the 25-foot setback by about, this says 1 foot 5 inches. And then that opens up a little bit more open yard in the back here. And this shows a 20 by 20. It's not quite 20 by 20. You can see how this is the green striped area is covered by the building by 2'7", and then this little piece juts into it by about 10 inches. So it's almost 20 by 20. This area here is about 12. And then, there's still quite a bit of open yard in the back.
Front.
Sorry, front. That's all. Staff recommended approval and supported the last project. We think this one's better because it has a little bit more open yard in the back. Now, this is actually overhung. This area here is shown as open, but it's actually overhung by the second story. But as staff, we consider that to be equivalent to a patio cover, which is something that the zoning ordinance allows to cover part of the open yard. So with that, I'm going to let the applicants really go into detail about what they studied and how they studied, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to state your name for the record.
Okay, for the record, my name's Robin Donaldson. I'm the architect for the applicant. And I think that I'll explain in just 1 second about exactly how we got to this, but I think it's germane to the discussion the fact that we're in a little different place than we would typically be for a modification hearing, in that obviously we already had modifications approved for basically the same project. We did find documents that showed there was different documents from what you saw at the previous hearing were not the actual documents that were the approved modification documents. The approved modification documents actually was for a footprint configured like this, and we have that we can show you. Needless to say, the staff has supported it in both cases. We've got that modification before. And also we're a little different than a typical modification hearing in that we have completed working drawings. We have an approved final ABR hearing. The approved final ABR was based on the modification approval. We got an extension on our ABR approval. We were not made aware of and did not know that the modification also expired, and that's really the reason we're here at all. I mean, so we're sitting with construction documents, all the engineering done. This got initiated when we went in for building permits, to get our building permits. So our solution of taking the house and taking your comments to heart and sliding the house further forward is based on this fact that that's where we're sitting today, and we think it's a smart solution for everybody from where we're, based on where we are today. I'd like Mark, as the applicant and the owner, to actually have a chance to say a few words, and I appreciate just taking a few minutes.
Yeah, the
to hear-
applicant team can say
Okay.
things too. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Okay.
Mark, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Mark Tapanier, and I just wanted to mention a few things briefly, and I will be brief, but our goal remains the same since 2006, and that's to build a home for our family and to improve the neighborhood. I grew up on the Mesa, and I want to build something nice there. I care about Santa Barbara a lot. We've worked for 4 years closely with Danny and Roxanne and the entire city to make something that everybody was happy with, including the neighbors, and at considerable expense in architecture fees and city fees. We got to a point in 2007 where the laws actually changed and the new SFBD came into effect, and even though we had been moving and working with the city, we were asked to then go under this new regulation. But then since we had prior modifications that were approved in 2007, May of 2007 was the cutoff date, it was concluded by the city that we were under the old ABR and that we had the ability to move forward, but they did want us to make concessions, and so we reduced the scale of the property by about 20%, including cutting out our entire mezzanine floor. But anyway, we considered ourselves lucky we passed that hurdle. It was a big deal, and we weren't sure what we would do at that point. It would be like starting from scratch. And so we continued to work for several years with the interior designers, the landscape guys, our architects, basically refining the program, the builder, to cost value engineer the project, and to get a project that was really what we believe to be beautiful and affordable. And we were pretty close to building it within the time expiration, but upon talking with the architect, it was deemed that we should take one more look at the thickness of the walls and some of the structural stuff and push it off a month rather than hurry and get our construction documentation in, because we felt that it would be valuable. And that 1 month mistake, I guess, is also partially why we're here today. But anyway, it's not all bad news. I'm happy that that you believe that we need more rear yard. I mean, working with the city was desirable to push the house back so that we could get more open yard. But I think really in looking at the new plan and having more rear yard is a benefit to our family, it's a benefit to the neighbor, and it's a benefit to the way that we can use the property and the way the property will be aesthetically balanced. Let's see. The other point that I'd like to make is the project is smaller and less invasive than what's there now. It's definitely going to be prettier, and it's also smaller than what we have previous approval for, which is worth noting. And
Previous modification approval.
okay,
The project that was previously approved in the modification had more square footage than.
And this one, it's 18. It's on the letter was submitted last night, right? From David. 1800's the residence, 445 is the garage, and 699 is the basement.
Yeah, those are the. Yeah.
so anyway, it's smaller. And this is the last thing I'd like to say is that this isn't a typical lot, all right? It's on a circle, it's a pie shape, it has these really weird things, and I think the architect has done a wonderful job of alleviating the need to take half of the property up a driveway by shifting the the house to the north side of the property and opening up all of this yard. I think moving it forward opens up more of that yard, and having more yard in the rear, more permeable yard is really a great thing. And I guess just with that, I hope that that this is the right direction. We have several directions if there's something more that you would like to see, because we're really prepared and would like to be able to start building our home, because Spike the builder was all lined up to build this job, and we have the financing secured and we're really ready to go. So we hope we're doing the right things. We're taking a bit of a gamble because we sort of have to guess, but we have multiple options in case that this one is not satisfactory to your liking.
Okay, great, thank you.
Back to the merits of what we're proposing. The project, we've taken the house in terms of how it relates to open yard and backyard. We've taken the house, the design is based on having as much open yard to the south and southwest as possible. You saw on the site visit there's a big existing kind of patio right in this area here. We're basically reestablishing that and want to use that. I don't think we don't think that you have any problem with that. And then obviously, if we can get more space back here by pushing the house as far forward as possible, that's advantageous for everybody. I want to show one document here. This is a diagram showing Skyline Circle and all the projects on Skyline Circle. The street actually comes up here. This is the 25-foot setback line here. Most of the properties have the same general disposition on this part of Skyline Circle as our property does, in that it comes and falls down to the street. Most of the properties all around this area all encroach into the front setback. And in fact, as you come around here, in fact, we calculate 64% of the properties actually do that. So historically, the fabric of the neighborhood has been structures pushing up closer to the street. Our proposal that we're doing today just basically kind of averages out, but we're basically on this 25-foot line here. We do have a document that shows what happens if we even take it another 2 feet. Yeah, the 2 feet sliding forward. I'm sorry, the 2 feet beyond this. Just for your own benefit, we just wanted to show it happens. This is the this is sliding it 3 feet forward from where it was before, and then you can see we get closer to having this actually be inside here. This is all facing south, so this all gets good light and so on. But we have overhangs, not the footprint of the house. The garage is actually pulled back underneath here. But we do have some habitable overhang here that would encroach in that 25-foot setback in this particular case.
Is that a foot, or is it? What was the?
Well, we
where
have
you're encroaching.
the maximum here. We have 30.
This is 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. So 29 inches there, and 2.5 there.
And just to
And then
to
part of
mention,
it pulls back, and then part comes out here. This piece does here.
and one of the reasons we're showing that is, upon talking with Danny and with Roxanne, we said, do we think we're doing enough? And they said, well, you may also consider looking at more, because there really isn't a residence in front. It's just a road. And if the main concern relative to the open yard in the back, or to the open yard, is the back area, then moving it forward in a place where it's really not affecting anybody may be a good solution and helps some of the other issues that we may have.
But this one is your preferred one, the first one? This is your preferred one?
To be honest, like, our preferred direction is,
If he could, he'd like to get more backyard.
I think this is a good solution. We just weren't sure if you were comfortable with having a little bit of the house pushing into the front yard setback, and really not understanding the law, because according to our understanding that we received the 25-foot demarcation based on our slope, and that a modification or extension to extend beyond that is what we were asking for with the site walls, or to build, into that zone.
Sidewalls
So-
in the front yard setback.
The sidewalls, but what we're really asking for there, I guess, is to go whatever it is, 2.5 in one area, and I guess 2.5 feet roughly into that front yard setback beyond what we have approval for. And the other point that upon doing the research that we realized is that a 35-foot or even a 25-foot setback as designated for E1 zoning is for a lot that's 3 times the size of this, and that would give you a lot more room to move around in, whereas we're really pinned in. So we feel that of course having the most yard for the family and for breathability and for distance between the neighbor is optimal.
Okay. Now, in regards to, actually, you answered the question, because the plan I saw regarding what was thought of being the approved plan showed the building itself located 20 feet from the property line. So what you're telling me is the one that was incorrect, that the building...
Maybe this will help clarify. This is the... What is... You have to explain. I forgot which one this was.
And what's your name, for the record?
Kevin Moore, Sheba Nelson Architects. Just for the history, we have this plan, which was approved, staff hearing officer approved in November 22nd, 2006. And this is what the city had on file. This is what you've seen previously, showing this back wall kind of jogging and doing this. Subsequently, yesterday, after spending some time with Roxanne, we discovered that in June of 2007, this is what was approved by the staff hearing officer.
So here's the building outline right here.
Correct. Which
So-
is substantially similar to what we are proposing now.
But it's open here, or is it overhung?
There's still an overhang. See this?
You have an overhang. That dotted line is actually an overhang there.
Right.
And then here's the existing house.
Correct. We overhang in the rear yard here as well, that dashed line.
The next plan I had wasn't clear that this looked like the outline, and then above it showed the outline like this for the second floor, and then for the third floor, I guess it's the second floor since there's a basement, still came in, but it still looked like it had the same outline. That it didn't look like there was an overhang. So
No,
the plans I saw, looks like it moved, the building moved over.
No, the plan has always, the second floor has always had this line here. That
Okay.
has not changed. That's
Okay.
been consistent through all the hearings. The only thing that's changed has been this footprint down at the base. But the actual approved one, this is showing, what is this showing? The orange is?
The orange is the 2006 approval.
Oh, okay. And then the drawing underneath is the actual approval
From 2007.
from 2007.
gray?
Yeah, and the gray and the dark lines.
Okay.
Which is
And this is what you were seeing before.
smaller than what we're showing today, right?
No, you're smaller than
We're
that.
smaller.
I mean, we're smaller than that.
Yeah, the footprint and then subsequent to that, we had our more ABR hearings, and the House, in response to the ABR and neighbor concerns and so on, got pushed around a bit more to where we got to where we are today. One last piece I just wanted to show is the rear elevation.
We can show it.
It's in this package. I think I want to clarify, the orange area here is the existing structure. During our hearings with the ABR and based on the solar angles and so on, our second story at the back of the house got reduced basically to this point. It's just it's about 12 feet wide here. This is the existing, which obviously is very wide. So the impact of this house, and there's no windows in the back, so the impact of this house particularly to the neighbor behind, is very minimal. That was discussed, presented, approved in the ABR process. And so I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about this back area, we understand how minimal the second story actually is back in this area in terms of its impact on the open space, the impact from the neighbor behind, and so on.
Okay. Now, were you the architect when it went through the ABR?
Yeah.
So you've been consistent. Okay, so I think at the last hearing or in the packet, it talks about, I think the ABR requested it to be pushed back, or...
They actually wanted the garage pushed back. That's one of the comments that they have in the minutes, so that the garage didn't come forward. So that's why this room here that we're showing encroaching here actually comes forward proud of the garage. There was not a desire to push the whole house back per se. The main concern had to do with the presentation of the garage at the front of the house and the impact from the street.
What about overhanging? Wasn't there some comments on overhangs?
Yeah, but that was really early on when we had the overhang way out here in front of this wall. And so what we did is we came and we took the overhang and we pushed it back from this mass. So
Originally, this mass originally was in front of this mass, and then we pulled that back. That was actually our first hearing. And we came back to the second hearing with that pulled back. This pushed in front of the garage, and then they were okay with it at that point in terms of how it addressed the street.
I think the other thing that's worth noting is very early on, everybody looked at this area back here and said, not a great area for putting a yard. Can you do something out here? And that's how we started building this out, but that also sort of forced us not to, push this house any more forward, right?
Yeah, especially this area here, because it started to encroach into the yard area we were trying to achieve out here, which is consistent with the existing condition that you saw the other day out there.
Well, neither of you two were at the other hearing, and what I stated my concerns as being at that time is in regards to our zoning ordinance. It's not the fact, I know there was a different staff hearing officer at that time, they reviewed it and they approved it, and it's not just a matter of difference of opinions. There's been actual changes in our code. And what I had said at the last meeting, that if this project were to come in right now, fresh, not the history that this one has, it'd be very difficult to support. Because since that time, we went through this process and amended the zoning ordinance to help provide flexibility in this situation when you have this extremely small lot and you have all these competing requirements, including this 1,250 square foot 1 yard area. How do you fit it all in? So we amended the zoning ordinance, and now properties less than 6,000 square feet can provide that area in separate areas as long as they each do 20 foot by 20 foot. So that's where my concern was coming, was the change in regulations, not in the change of viewpoints. And so that's why I had asked, is there, if there can be additional area in the back. Another concern is with the proposed landscaping that would grow, has the potential of growing tall, if not maintained, similar to what's there, then that is also inconsistent with the vision of front yard setbacks and the walling in of it. I don't have a problem with the increase in the wall height here to provide the level area for the patio. It's just increased screening, and if the idea is to have this for views and use, and then it's all screened in, that's kind of contradictory. So that's where my concerns were at that hearing.
So just to address the landscaping, my dad's a grower, and he's the guy that actually hooked up Tim Doles, the landscape architect, and so he wasn't available yesterday, but I contacted my dad, and the idea is to keep it a beachy feel with kind of Mediterranean style, more and tropical type plants. And so this plant, Nandina, it's a bamboo-like plant. It's prettier than bamboo, and it grows to like 4 or 5, 6 feet. But it won't. It's more of a bush than a tall pole that just keeps growing like the bamboo. So that's what we have. Updated in the new landscape plan.
But your request Fences, walls, screens, hedges, they're all limited within 10 feet of the front property line to be no higher than 3.5 feet. And the request is for the wall to be higher than 3.5 feet, not landscaping. Right? That's the way it's written in here, to allow
this wall, right.
a wall to exceed 3.5 feet. And then along the drive, somewhere along the driveway. I remember the
Well,
old
no,
plans were
it
highlighted.
steps down here.
So this
It's-
oh, it's on this side?
It's this
Okay.
piece here.
All right, well, I think those are my questions for right now. I'm going to open the public hearing. I had one request to speak. Peter Susi, if you'd like to come up. Oh, we need to share. Yeah. Yeah. Good morning.
Morning. I'm Peter Susi. I spoke at the last meeting. If you forgive me, I'm going to read some of the things I have to say because I don't really speak your language as well as you all speak it. First, just in terms of what's happening today, I didn't know till yesterday that there had been plans submitted that we were going to move ahead with a substantive hearing today. It was kind of left up in the air, as you recall, at the last meeting.
Well, no, I continued specifically today to
and
discuss the revised.
And I understand that. No, I'm not saying that it wasn't proper or anything. I just said I didn't know till yesterday. And the plans I didn't know had been filed until yesterday, or given to Mr. Cato. He offered to let me see them this morning, and I understood yesterday afternoon they were in his office. The only point I'm making is that we've had very little time, virtually no time, for anybody to look at these plans, to see what's happened, or make any kind of comment on them. And I'm really not able to do that today. I've listened to what's been said. I understand that they've made an effort to meet your concerns. I understand that the house has been moved 2 feet forward. It's not at all clear to me. I think the house is still coming back towards us, but probably less so, is what I understand. There were also decks that were mentioned in the last meeting, one in the back left corner, one in the front right corner. I assume those are still part of the plan, although, again, I haven't seen it. Again, it's just a question of, has anyone really had a meaningful opportunity to review and comment on these plans? And I would question that. The second point is that I, again, understand that the normal process is for changes to go first to ABR, then to have them comment, and then come back to the hearing officer. This seems to be a little bit backwards because there are now new modifications being requested that haven't been to ABR. I understand there was an ABR approval that was extended, but as you've pointed out, there have been new guidelines adopted in 2007, the Single Family Design Board guidelines, and my understanding is that this is a new project that has to live by those rules, and that includes this FAR ratio and so forth. And thus, while they may be technically grandfathered into ABR jurisdiction, this project has never been before SFDB, requires a major deviation from their guidelines, and really ought to be reviewed and commented on them by them before you act. I also understand from what I've heard this morning that there's a greater front yard modification now being requested than was initially requested. The notice that we got of this hearing was just the same notice that was of the last hearing, with the same verbiage. It was not at all clear what was being requested. Next to lastly, support the staff. I apparently now supports these modifications. As I had pointed out earlier, in 2006, Ms. Belts made clear that the staff did not support a modification of the 1,250 square foot open space requirement with minimum 20-foot dimensions. And I think this is really an application to rezone property from E1 to E3 without going through the rezoning process. This neighborhood was rezoned to E1 many years ago because it's dense, and it's getting more dense all of the time, as Mr. Donaldson's pictures indicate. Illegal rentals are rampant in this neighborhood, and in fact, this property, before Mr. Tapner bought it, and not since, has had a history of multiple renters, one to a room. It was a nightmare for us for many years until he did buy it. But it also has a long history of city compliance issues, which your files are full of, including the denial of the modification that I brought to you at the last meeting. That is a particular reason for our sensitivity. We are long-term residents in this neighborhood. This project is going to have a huge impact on me as well as other neighbors. The building, which is already oversized for the lot, is apparently not getting any smaller, and in fact in square footage is getting larger, albeit some of it is buried. If it's built, we've had some conversations about resolving our issues, by the way. As far as Mr. Tappner has been entirely in good faith in those discussions, I have no harsh words to say about him. On the other hand, we haven't gotten resolved. And yet, and hopefully we some point will, but if this plan is approved, the result on the back line will be to remove a fence. This is to put in his retaining wall and footings that he needs. Not only remove the fence, but there are 2 trees that are, I'm now told, are on his property, which I'd always understood were my trees, that are mature. One's a Myoporum, one's a Pittosporum. They're 30, 40-foot trees, at least, and those will have to be torn out, and it will not only, according to the arborist that we had come over from Turk Heslin's place, will also basically damage severely and may kill other mature trees on our property, which are between us and Mr. Tappner, which include a 45-foot cedar, a 75-foot redwood, and a 40-foot yew tree. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to die, but the point is simply that it's going to have impacts in that back area. And I think listening today, again, what really just strikes me is, and everybody's making yeoman efforts, and I applaud them for it, but to put a very large house on a very small lot, and this is a 3,000 square foot house on a 5,000 square foot lot. They've been moving this thing, tweaking it, and apparently this last tweak is, going to pick up some inches here and take some inches away there. But at the end of the day, the question is this consistent with what the single-family design board had in mind when they talk about these kind of lots in this kind of a neighborhood? This is going to be a very large house, and I understand there's already a very large house there, but it's effectively going to be a vacant lot soon because they're going to go in there and knock that house down. And the question is, can and should this be approved? And I will leave that to you to decide. I do recall you saying at the last meeting, there's no way I can make these findings that I need to make to approve this. Maybe this tweak gives you the ability to do that. I question that. And I also question the procedure that's been followed to get it done. What I don't question is that they've been entirely in good faith in trying, but I just question the end result.
Okay, great, thank you.
I didn't sit up here, but I'm the attorney for the applicant.
Okay, well, wait.
Respond?
No. I actually would like Mr. Kato to respond to the comments regarding the process for the review of this project and the Single Family Design Board versus the ABR, Architectural Board of Review.
This project was in process before the Single Family Design Board was created, and at that time there was a whole procedure who got to stay with the ABR, who had to go to the SFDB, and this was determined to remain with the ABR.
Which is similar to other projects that were that stage of the process.
Yeah, there were a number of other projects that were in the same situation. We're 3 years later, so this is one of the last ones that's still in that group of projects, since most of them already got their approvals. So, and they were subject to a certain amount of the new rules. I mean, there are other procedures for when projects are already in process, when new rules come in place. sometimes they don't have to comply at all, sometimes they have to fully comply, and this was, I think this was someplace in between. I'm not absolutely sure on that history.
My recollection is we had to comply with FAR's heights. Anything that was more restrictive was applied to our project. That's why the project reduced in size.
The main change, or the main,
The main
not
change was
concession, but it was projects that already received some kind of approval were allowed to remain with the ABR instead of being switched over to the SFDB and then
you were
have a
well
different
through
review.
the process with the
Basically, if you had
ABR.
if you had modifications prior to May 1st, 2007, you can proceed through design review to building permit and construction.
Because you're already certain.
right, because you're already certain part of the way through the project. So and it still has an ABR approval. Obviously, and the reason that we didn't have it go back to ABR between 2 weeks ago and today is because there is no real change to the architecture of the building. The whole building is remaining the same as it was approved by ABR. Simply move forward 2 to 3 feet. And we didn't believe that. We said, I still don't believe that warrants ABR comments before you saw it again.
Okay.
As far as the notice goes, the notice was particularly in for the modification. It was the modification to permit construction within the required 30-foot front setback. So that is, that I guess I can say that's sufficiently vague to allow a number of different things. It wasn't intended for this 2 weeks ago, but the notice is covered. It covers the modification that would need to be approved today to allow this to go forward if that was your inclination.
Okay.
The size of the house is above grade is 1,800 square feet. 1,800 square feet on this pad. Basement. This was all taken into consideration with the BAR. It's basement area that's added in here. So to characterize this house is just ridiculous. It has the actual apparent size of this house
And it's smaller, considerably smaller than what's there, and
than the existing structure.
and the layering of the architecture will make it less invasive to all neighbors.
Okay. I think those are my questions. In regards to the project, Mr. Cotton and I, went out to your site on Monday, got access to the backyard, looked around, saw the improvements, the fence and stuff in the back, and I appreciate you moving the building up more, providing more area between the two. I also appreciate the fact that in the areas that impact the neighbors the most, you are respecting the setbacks. Because a lot of times with the smaller lots, people are asking not only open yard modification requests, also interior yard setback requests, and front yard setback requests. And a lot of times when I review front yard modification requests, I look at those different than an open yard modification or an interior yard modification, because like open yard modifications, when you have less than the required area, you're just impacting yourself. You have less usable area, less area to enjoy on the outside. So that's impact more to you. There's also sort of an impact to the neighbor in that open yard areas by default, because they have to be 20 feet, has to be assumed area, does provide additional buffer between properties, but it mainly affects you in terms of what's behind the fence. Interior yard setbacks, they encroach onto your neighbor, and so you really want to look at what's proposed within that setback. And then in regards to the front setback, that affects more of the community at large, because it's private property, but it is in the public view. So you have to be, I think, extra careful at looking at what kind of things encroach into the front setback. And in this instance, you are asking for your building and for some of your outdoor area, which is meant to be used privately and, barbecues, and I noticed you have a barbecue up on the second floor, but used for areas to recreate. And so that's why I had the concern with the landscaping when it is part of the public visual setting in the street, and then you're proposing this landscaping that's now enclosing it. So no, it's not a building, but it is enclosing and it's encroaching into part of the public viewscape. And so that's why I have concerns with the landscaping in that area. I think in regards to the building encroachment, looking at the development of the circle, on the inside of the circle, it doesn't really apply to the outside because there's different views and so there's development. But in terms of the interior of the setback, interior of the circle, the 25 setback foot encroachment into that does seem appropriate. It's consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood. And the wall height, I don't have the concern with. And I think with the fact of moving the building up away from the back, that provides additional separation between the rear property and this one, and it also provides more usable outside area. Now, Mr. Cato, this is the one that was brought before me, but in terms of staff's recommendation, I know this one was in the packet too. Which one was staff supportive of?
Ms. Reardon, we were supportive of the 2 foot, pushing the building 2 feet to the front.
So the one right here?
No, that's this one.
Oh, this one?
This one that we're looking at here is a 30-foot encroachment. It's actually moving the building up 30 feet.
This
So you
is
can-
a document that he has in our staff hasn't seen before, by the way.
Oh, this one
Right.
isn't in? It was just in the email you sent to me?
No, we just prepared it for this meeting today. I did send you in the very original email what it would look like 1, 2, 3, and 4,
Right.
and was trying to get some feedback to see if moving the building really far forward, gaining a lot of extra rear yard was something that you would be receptive to, and just trying to get some sort of feedback so that we could gauge how we move forward. And I think the comments from both Danny and Roxanne was that could be a good idea. And so what I asked the architects to do is let's do what we know that we think is within the exact letter of the law in case there's issues with moving the building forward. But let's have a few that we bring to this meeting so that we can actually hopefully move forward that show it moving forward and forward, because I got the feeling from talking with you on the site and everything that yard is a good thing, right? And so my feeling is if we're really looking at the intent of the code, which is to provide more land for the family and so forth, then it makes a lot of sense. And since we're not really encroaching on another neighbor moving forward, you might like to see drawings that move even further forward than what we had originally submitted last Friday. I believe that was the date, right?
We were closed Friday.
Thursday, sorry.
Ms. Reardon, from my perspective as the staff, I prefer the 2 foot, just because in the previous iteration there was really no building setback encroachment there's no building setback encroachment. It was all kind of this open yard, right? And the way this has been situated, this part of the building, the front property line curves, so the setback line curves. So you don't really want to have a curvy front building, really, front of the building. So what this does is this keeps the front corner in the setback, and it's only this little corner that encroaches a little tiny piece on the second story here. And I think, when I looked at that, I thought that was an adequate amount of open yard in the back. I think that once you start to balance, open yard versus front, I know that in previous years, City Council and Planning Commission has been pretty protective of the front setback. Mm-hmm. So, for that reason, I would recommend this one as opposed to this one. Now that I look at it, I do thank you for preparing it so that we can take a good look at it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your efforts to respond to the concerns that I had. I also, I understand where you guys are coming from. You know, you went through the city's process, good faith, did everything, responded to all the changing circumstances because you had the Single Family Design Board and all the changes. And like I said at the previous hearing, if this was a brand new project, and I know it is brand new approval since the other ones have expired, but it's not the same as having a project come in at brand new. But if it was a brand new project, there'd have to be more significant changes. But I think the changes that you guys have proposed in moving the building closer, I think that does make the project supportable. And I could make the findings and approve the revised project with the maximum, well, it's technically 30 minus 5, 6.5, right? To allow the encroachment into the front setback as shown on this plan. But I would like to add a condition regarding the landscaping, just to be clear that the landscaping shouldn't, it could go up. The idea is to help screen the wall too, right?
Right.
Well, I guess you can have it come down over the wall.
Well, yeah. The goal is we wanted to show kind of the tops of the material because we think it's beautiful, but have screening so that somebody's not looking at the neighbor's not looking at a big piece of mass there.
You're not looking at this wall.
So limiting the
But
landscaping.
Obviously, we want to clearly see over it, and keep it low enough to...
So limiting it to 3.5 feet.
Okay.
How far is this? More than, if this is 10 over here, a little bit more. Like I just put within 10 feet of the front property line, limiting it to 3.5, the landscaping to 3.5 feet, and make it clear that the wall can exceed 3.5 feet as shown on the site plan, but the landscaping is limited to the 3.5 feet. Then there was other miscellaneous items shown on the site plan that I was questioning about last time. And one of them was what Mr. Susi had brought up about decks and stuff in the setback. So those during the plan check process may have to be removed. I don't know what they are. Maybe you can show me.
We've removed
deck
them
and it's-
already. There was like a little...
I think we just had like a little. It was going to be
There was-
like a little zen zone area to hang out, but it's
then
not
some-
critical to the
yeah.
project.
So just to make you aware, what I'm approving is just the modification request. It's not any of the miscellaneous stuff that was shown in the setback.
Okay.
Okay.
That those.
That has to comply with zoning
Yes.
code.
But is your intent there to have as much permeable land as possible? Okay.
Yeah. And then the bench that we had talked about is being removed. There was a bench. Okay. So I think that was actually just the only thing. So limit the landscaping. The house is pulled up 2 feet from the back property line.
Actually,
This one.
good go.
As shown on this plan.
This was the submitted plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, you have an approval with the condition, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and the appeals of my actions are actually filed over here at the Planning and Zoning counter versus City Hall. The other appeals are filed at City Hall. And Planning Commission also has oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up within that same 10-day appeal period. And if that was to occur, Mr. Kato would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you very much for your
Sure.
time. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. just want to hang on to all of these ones?
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay. The last project is 903 West Mission Street. We still have the meeting. Can you go out in the hall? Great, thanks.
Meant to say Mark, right there back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good.
Good to see you again. I have only a couple minor changes to make, but I'll let this go first if you want to talk about it.
Okay, so Kelly Broadison, Assistant Planner. The project I'm presenting today is a proposal for to demolish an existing 317 square foot non-conforming garage and construct a 525 square foot second story accessory dwelling unit above a new 623 square foot 3-car garage. This proposal would require 2 modifications, one to allow the construction of the new garage to encroach into the front yard setback on Gillespie Street, and another modification to provide less than the required common open yard area of 600 square feet. The existing lot is a 5,000 square foot lot, and it's in the R2 zone, which allows accessory dwelling units. And as you can see, the house is located on a corner lot, so it's constrained by 2 front yard setbacks. The required setback for the front yard is 15 feet, and for garages that face the street, the setback would be 20 feet. Let's see. The new garage is proposed to provide a 3rd covered parking spot for the accessory dwelling unit. In order to provide the required 10-foot width for common open area here in the rear yard, and also to meet the interior minimum dimensions of 20 feet for a garage, the applicant is requesting a modification for the garage to encroach approximately 18 inches into the front yard setback on Gillespie Street. Staff, we felt that this would be supportable. Basically, you're kind of balancing 3 things. You're kind of balancing the front yard setback, the dimension required for the garage, and also the rear yard dimension here. We felt that the encroachment of 18 inches into the front yard setback was supportable because if we didn't allow that, we would be kind of kicking in a different mod for the open space in the back and also possibly not meeting the interior dimensions of the garage. See, transportation staff reviewed the proposal and prefers this requested encroachment into the front setback instead of reducing the interior depth of the garage by 18 inches because the 12 inches of encroachment is due to the thickness of the walls of the garage. And the length of the area in front of the garage between here and here is 19.5 feet, which meets transportation standards. Basically, if it were to occur on site, a car could park in the driveway without sticking too far out into the sidewalk area. The other modification consists of a proposal to provide less than the required amount of open space. When you provide 2 dwelling units on this lot, let's see, the common open yard areas would be required to be at least 600 square feet or 2 areas of 300 square feet with the minimum dimensions of 10 by 10. The way the existing house is situated on the lot, let's see, the existing house is situated on the lot so that neither of these open space requirements can be met. Additionally, it's, as I said earlier, constrained by 2 front setbacks. The project does meet the locational requirements of the open yard because it's not located in the front yard setbacks. There's some here and here outside of the front yard setbacks. And it does provide 1 area of 375 square feet for the new residents here. And for the existing residents in the front, it does provide the required amount of open space. It just breaks it up into 2 areas, one of 237 square feet here and another of 130 square foot here. And they both meet the minimum dimensions of 10 by 10. Also, the project meets the requirements for providing the private outdoor living space for each unit. So although they don't meet the minimum size of 300 square feet, staff's position is that adequate open yard is being provided. So with that, staff recommends that the staff hearing officer approve the modifications for this project. And there is one condition that we've added, that all construction within the right-of-way, including the new driveway, curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and relocation of a street sweeping sign, will require a permit from Public Works Department. Let's see, and I also received 2 letters in opposition of this project. One is from a Pamela Brandon, I think her name is, and she lives, I think, here. And she lives in the back, I guess, on that lot, yeah. And then we also have one from a Brandon Smith, who lives across the street on Gillespie. I don't know if you want to read the letters or...
I've read them.
Okay, you already read both
Yeah.
of them. Okay, and so that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd like to state your name for the record and...
Absolutely. My name's Clay Arell. I'm the architect for the project. With me is Heidi Ferguson. She's the property owner. We haven't actually seen those letters, so would it be possible to...
I forwarded them to you this morning. That's one
I know,
got
I was
them.
walking over here when you forwarded them to
Okay.
me.
I can make a copy for him before you leave.
That'd be great.
Let me see.
Oh, and there's one from Paula Westbury, too.
Yeah, okay. I'm familiar with her letters, actually. Heidi will like that one. Let me start first by just commenting on Kelly's presentation. This is one of those things where you're balancing several different things. When we first looked at this project, the owner was working with the previous architect, and they were providing the open yard areas in these 2 locations only. The previous architect wasn't getting any support from ABR in terms of mass bulk and scale of the project, and the client, the owner, decided to switch and go with a different architect, that being me. And we looked at it, and the biggest issue that we had, one of the first things we started with was the open yard. We knew that staff wasn't supportive of the substandard proposal by the previous architect, so we looked at what are some ways to get, 1, more open yard, 2, open yard space that does comply, and 3, look at it a little bit through a creative lens. So one of the things I did is I walked around the neighborhood. This parcel, the adjacent parcel, has a carport in the front yard. It's closer than 20 feet. There's a project down the block that has 2 single-car garages closer than 20 feet. I have photos of that in the house across the street. The garage, I haven't measured it. It looks closer than 20 feet, or it looks about what we're proposing. So there is some evidence of that in the neighborhood. We felt that what was more valuable for this project was to have adequate open yard space in this part of the site. And the only way to get it was to push this forward 18 inches. That gets us the requirement. It also gets us away from the neighbor, which we liked. It provides us with an open yard space that's adequate. And because we're sitting on a corner lot, if we weren't on a corner lot, if you took this street out, we would have no issue with our open yard space on this side of the property. Albeit it'd be a different project, probably have a driveway or whatever. But so we really looked at this. We've actually removed, and it's not showing on this plan, but we've removed a portion of the house here so that we could actually open up that area. And we felt that the way the house is situated now, and if I could look at the existing site plan for a second, I'll show you. The way the house is situated now and the way the owner uses the house, they use the front yard. The dogs run around here, the kids run around here. They have a little deck off the back kitchen. The garage is substandard, it doesn't comply. And really, their yard, because of this house being situated as it is and the garage being situated as it is, they don't have really a backyard. And this is really the only yard space available to this property, based on how it was originally built. So we felt that, taking that into consideration, that this solution actually gave us back some of the backyard, which is nice. It also left us with the front yard, which is nice, and it's a nice buffer on the corner. And we also kind of felt that this isn't 300 square feet, but we're not putting a fence up. We're not enclosing this. It's not going to feel like 237 square feet. It's going to feel like 237 square feet here, plus 750 square feet here, and 1,200 square feet here. So, in the intent, I get the intent of the code, and I think that we're providing a solution that's very functional, as is very common with all the properties around this area. One other thing I wanted to bring up is we did a couple studies, and I'm going to use the existing site plan. I want to do it the same way you're looking at it. I live on an R2 lot, 5,000 square feet on the east side, not on the west side, the east side. And I've been looking at my property to see what I can do with it. What's been interesting is the 1,250 square foot requirement we looked at in two diagrams here. Here's the existing home, here's the existing garage. As the house sits today, if they wanted to add anything to this property, they would have to comply with the 1,250 square feet. And that basically there's one version of 1,250 square feet, which is clearly in the front yard setback and not allowed. And here's another version of 1,250 square feet, which is, again, in the front yard setback and not allowed. So anything that's ever done to this property, in any way, shape, or form, would definitely need an open yard mod, even if they wanted to make the garage compliant or any of those sorts of things. So by that reasoning, we're feeling like this is a very good solution. It gets the homeowner what she's looking for, and it addresses I think the intent of the code, which is provide adequate open yard space. I want to also note that I did some calculations. The existing footprint of all buildings on the current site is 1,161 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot. The new footprint with our additions is 1,442. Now, in the report, it says building area is 1,999, and that's because that was adding the area of the unit which is above the ground plane. So I'm just talking about footprint of actual structure to earth. We're only adding 281 square feet of actual footprint to dirt. The other square footage is actually up above here. So it is a modest addition. It is helping out the owner. The last thing I wanted to bring up was this owner has expressed concern, and she's written a letter, which I haven't reviewed in entirety. But this, you can have this if you need this. She contacted me. I think we spoke on Monday, and she had some concerns about windows here looking in to the back. After discussing it with her, she wanted me to take all the windows out. I felt that I didn't want to lose all the windows and lose all of the light. As you know, true north is really here on the plans, and the sun's moving around this way. So getting as much of that light in as possible would be really great. So I explained this to the owner. She spoke with the neighbor, and what we did is we changed the floor plan, and we can go to A2.01. I'm sorry, 2.02. Originally, the proposal was a very narrow window here in the kitchen, and a very tall, high clear-story window in the bathroom. So we'd have mirrors up to 6 feet, and then we'd have a window above that. And that was the original design. We've since changed that to reflect a different design, wherein we've taken the small window out of the kitchen that would provide more viewing, and we've done a tall, clear-story window just across the kitchen. So it's up high. The sill of the window is at 6'6". We've taken the window out of the bathroom and put it on the other side, on the southeast side of the property. So
Still high?
And then that's a tall window also, because it's in the shower. It's got to be high so we don't impact it. Unless you really are into that kind of thing, but we're not. So maybe if you're in the backwoods somewhere and it didn't matter. So these are both high, clear-story windows. I've done a diagram here. This is actually an elevation looking this way, interior elevation of the kitchen. So you can see there's a refrigerator, cabinetry, here's the upper cabinets, and then there's just, this is all glass across the back. And the height of this is 6'6" above the floor, and I did an actual section through it. So here's the cabinets, here's the upper cabinets, and here's the window. Here's a person. So there's actually no way to, your eyesight never does that. So there's really no way to actually have any visual impact on this neighbor here at all. And I think we've, hopefully for her, we've been able to mitigate that issue for her and allow our owner to get the light in this part of the project that we like and we love. So let's check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. The garage is supported by transportation. She already mentioned that. One thing that Kelly had mentioned just about the car in the driveway.
Yeah, you're not allowed to park in the driveway.
I know.
Zoning violation.
I know. I know that. But she had mentioned something about, I'm going to paraphrase, sorry Kelly, but you had mentioned that because this dimension here was 19.5, transportation was supportive of it, because if anybody did pull into the driveway for any reason, that the car would not stick out on the sidewalk. I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's valuable. I have a 1963 Lincoln Continental in my garage. It's probably the biggest boat of a car around, and the length of that car is only 16 feet 6 inches. So nobody's driving those kinds of cars anymore. So an average car isn't, even if somebody did park in that spot, we wouldn't be impacting the sidewalk. I just want to make sure that was stated. And then I have other photos. This is down the street of a garage that's about 8 feet off the property line, right on the corner. That one's, here's Gillespie and Mission. Here's our project, and that's right down the street. They have a garage right at the street here and a garage right at the street here. And that was done, this was approved in 2000.
I do have a question regarding the open yard.
Sure.
It's located in the back here, and you had explained how justifying why this one meets the letter of the code, and you're doing a lot of explanation now how this one meets the intent. It doesn't meet the letter, but it meets the intent of this whole. How do you envision the open yard to work? Because I know this meets the letter of the code, and it does provide a nice increased buffer for your two-story unit from this property line, and it provides for an increased setback over what's required. However, it's the back of the garage. You go through the garage to get through it to the garage. How do you envision it to be opened? I mean, to be used for both units, the open yard. Is it more of this is this person's and this is this person's, and
not. To be honest with you, the way we've intended this is going to be family living here. Grandma's moving in, and Grandpa, and they're helping Mom, and they have their unit above the garage, and they have this, and it's really going to be family use. Mm-hmm. How we've been talking about them using it is having some open area out here that they can access through the kitchen and come out here. Having this unit has its own balcony up here, which exceeds the requirement, but they're going to live together, and they're going to have their privacy and whatnot. This area out here, the real reason we took this piece off was that the client didn't like it. The front door was actually here before, and she wasn't happy with it aesthetically, and I agreed. And this actually gave us some, I think it's 25 square feet to apply towards that. But, I think that they're going to, maybe she could say more. I think they're going to live together, and they're going to live, and they're going to share out here, and they're going to share back here for different uses. And they have dogs, and so dogs can hang out back here and not be out on the corner. And, I think it's
all the way around.
And jump on
That's probably the best that I can answer it, because I don't think we haven't studied it as how you're going to live and use it, other than how they're using it now, which is they live out in here, and because they don't have anything back here. So this is probably going to be a bonus for them, is to actually have something back here that they can go in use.
This hasn't been used at all because this is where there's 3 fruit trees on the neighbor's property, so there's animals that hang out back there that...
And the garage is actually pushed way back there.
Yeah, that was actually another question I had for staff. The current layout, as Clay had illustrated. Well, your little 8.5 by 11 sheets.
Oh, did I take those back?
No, it currently doesn't meet the requirement, right?
Correct.
Because this is too narrow.
Correct.
You can only do 850 in your front.
This is 8 feet here,
Uh-huh.
which we looked at. It's close, but it isn't there. And the garage, this is the 6-foot line, that's the 3-foot line, so the garage is right about, I'd say 4 3/4, probably right in the middle, and then this is, 4 or 5 feet off the back line.
Okay.
And the garage in the R2, as you know, can encroach into 3 feet on interior and rear, but we didn't like that idea. Because it didn't actually give us anything in the front anyway, because it's driveway.
Right. Okay. I'd like to open the public hearing. I have 2 requests to speak forms. One is Pam Brandon, and she'll be followed by Mimi Greenberg.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, yes, my name is Pam Brandon. I am the property owner and neighbor living next door to Heidi at 905 West Mission Street. I did turn in a letter to you, so I know you have that. I received the notice for this public hearing almost 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, that is the first notice I have received about this, and so that's why my concerns are just coming up at this point, just so you know. So when I got that, I did come down to the city and looked at the plans, saw the whole scope of the project because I was not aware that there was going to be a second unit dwelling and all of that on a second story. So, so I looked at the plans, and I did have a concern of windows that would be facing into my backyard. Two concerns. One is having a second unit dwelling on a lot that's too small for what they want, according to Santa Barbara rules and regulations, and I worry that that will devalue property value of my property. But beyond that, my biggest concern is my privacy, because I'm a very private person, and that's very important to me, as I've talked to Heidi about, in my backyard. So the windows are a huge concern for me, as well as I believe that those would further devalue my property. So, so I did talk to Clay. Heidi was unavailable at the time, so I talked to Clay about that. And then afterwards, I did talk to Heidi as well and explain my concerns about that. So I am glad to see now that they have, because it's one thing Heidi and I spoke about, was moving the bathroom window to the other wall. So it looks like at this point, the plans that they've submitted, if I understand correctly, is that there's just one window that's now facing my backyard. So as they said, that is for light, so I would just ask, could there be a skylight instead of a window? So I would still feel like that would be less of an invasion into my privacy, into my backyard, or solar tubes, or potentially I have to look at their plan if the window could go on the side towards her house. So that, I mean, I guess it's just, that's all I would say, is that obviously having a second-story dwelling unit on a second story in a small lot like that is going to affect the value negatively towards my property. However, I understand she wants to do this, and I am certainly willing to compromise with her, and like I said, my privacy is crucial to me. So if the city, I would be willing to not contest the whole thing if the city would just make a condition that in order to get the approval for her modifications to build the whole project, that the windows would all be removed from the side that's facing into my backyard. So if just clearly stipulated that no windows would be on that new building facing 905 West Mission, my property, then I would be okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I have received your letter, and I did read it.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next speaker is Mimi Greenberg.
I think it's easiest if I just kind of read my letter real quick. I'll just take about 3 minutes. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a property owner in the city of Santa Barbara, and have worked as a real estate agent in this fair city for many years. Approximately 10 years ago, I represented Pam Brandon in the purchase of her home at 905 West Mission, which is adjacent to this subject property. I apologize for not writing this letter sooner. Unfortunately, Ms. Brandon did not receive the initial notification mailed by the city last year to alert the neighbors of this request for modification. Last week, the second notice mailed was the first notice she received regarding her neighbor's modification request. The non-receipt of the initial notice is a shame, as the Brandon home would be the most affected by granting of this mod. The plans submitted for the subject property modification allow for windows that would overlook the Brandon property. It's no surprise that the loss of privacy to the Brandon backyard will be a huge negative. I am surprised that the designer did not incorporate any skylights or solar tubes for just this reason. Initially, just the loss of privacy, windows, and light, second-story structure adjacent to any backyard is an immediate negative. From the real estate standpoint, which house would you buy? The one with the traditional private backyard, or the one with the looming two-story building, blocking morning sun and windows, watching your backyard every move next door? Think about your own backyards and how you would react if the city was considering allowing or a modification so that your neighbor could take your privacy. I can't tell you the exact dollar amount of value lost to the Brandon property, but I assure you it would be significant. And I understand that the city does now allow accessory buildings on R2 5K lots, but I wouldn't think that that would include approval of a bird's eye view of adjacent property backyards. This seems to me to be a perfect application for skylights and solar tubes.
Great, thank you. I see no one else in the audience. Like I said, we received a letter from Mimi today, and then from Pam Brandon, and then I also received another letter from Brandon Smith, as Kelly had indicated. And he had concerns with the project, but it focused on the front setback versus the open yard. And he recognized that these sites are constrained, and so that was his concern. And then I have another letter expressing concern from Paula Westbury. So I'll close the public hearing. I went out to the site, visited the site, and walked around the neighborhood, and I've read the staff report. And the zone, what's before me, before the staff hearing officer today, is the modification request for a front setback and the open yard requirement. Our zoning ordinance allows a secondary dwelling unit. We amended it 7 years ago, 8 years ago, recognizing the benefit that these types of units provide for the community. You know, smaller size, it's a requirement they never be converted to condos, and it allowed for the breaking up of the open yard area, which you've done. However, it specifies 2 areas versus the 3. So the proposed use is consistent with the zoning ordinance. The height of the building is consistent with the zoning ordinance. So I don't have purview over that. It's all design related. So, and since they're not asking for an interior yard modification, I don't have purview over the location of the windows, but I could suggest to the single family, or the ABR, this is the Architectural Board Review, them to study the windows to maximize the privacy between the two neighbors. And I think Clay's done a good job of responding to the concerns of the high windows at 6.5 feet. The average person, only a basketball player, will be able to look out of the window. So I think that was really good that you've responded to the concerns of your neighbor. In regards to the open yard modification request, like I said, it meets the letter of the law of this area here. I do have concerns regarding the usability of it. However, the ordinance does state that the open yard area can be limited to a unit or it can be open to all. So I would hope if later on, if there was a different tenant up here, that they would have access to some other area that's not tucked in the back. But it's like a balancing of issues, like you were saying. I like the fact that it is provided back here because it does provide the additional setback from your neighbor, and especially since it is going two-story. So I like that fact. And I don't have a concern with the provision of it in two other areas of the site. In regards to the front setback modification, I actually am supportive of it. I would have more concerns if the garage were proposed in front of the existing house. If the house, was back in this area and you're asking for the 1.5-foot encroachment, that's a different situation. But in this situation, the existing development is still closer to the street than your proposed garage, and the neighbors, the adjacent property, that existing house is still closer to the street than your garage. So although it does encroach a foot and a half.
We looked at a design where we pushed this way forward and got all the open yard back here, and we didn't go that route because of the exact reason you're saying. I totally forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
We had a design where we pushed. Sorry.
Thanks, Danny. Sorry about that, guys. Where we had pushed this forward, encroaching so that we get all the open yard back here. But again, you've pointed to it, and I didn't mention it because of basically what you're saying is it would put the garage way forward of this sort of the prevailing setback line along here. That's why we discounted it pretty quickly.
Yeah, so that's why I could find the request for the garage, and then the second story does go straight up, right? So it's a request for the garage and the the balcony.
Yeah, all
it's
that's
a
out
balcony.
here is the balcony. Yeah.
Yeah. So the building would be out, but just be the balcony
if it was
above.
a roof or whatever, but it's just the private outdoor living space for that unit, which is more than required.
Yeah. So I could find that consistent with the neighborhood. And I do have another question there. You explained the common open area. The storage. How do you envision this working? You have the trash tucked behind the house, and the storage for Unit 1 tucked behind the house. I think that's what's denoted here, and then there's windows.
Yeah, it might show in the elevation, but I'll just...
Well, the fence is in the elevation. I was trying to see that too. The fence is here.
Right. I think it was this plan, sorry. Oh, no, it was this plan.
So this overhangs?
It overhangs a couple feet, yeah. Kind of like a patio cover like the previous project we were looking at. This is intended to be a low kind of shed. So it would be under the base of the windows, and it would provide storage back there.
So below the fence line?
Yeah, it's not really seen, but it would it's kind of in this location. These sort of side yard storage. It meets the requirement for the cubic feet requirement. It would be a place to put your gardening tools.
So this here's 200 cubic. It's not combined.
Correct. This is 200 cubic for this unit.
And then I saw the one on the second floor.
Second floor, that's at the top of the stairs here. So it's outside the unit, which is per zone.
And then accessing the trash, they just come through, and this person would walk away.
Yeah, it'd kind of be through the back. I mean, I'm showing trash on here just because that's where we're thinking of where it needs to go.
And it's out of the setback.
And it's out of the setback, so we have that. We actually have, we've got the space kind of right there to put it out of the setback and on the property. Out of the garage. All those things that we need to comply
All the
with.
different things. Huh? Okay. That was a question for that. All right. Well, like I said, I can balance all the competing things with the open yard, and I can make the findings outlined in the staff report for that. And then also with the front setback, given all the factors, that I can make the findings for that too. So I approve your project, subject to the condition approval that's contained in the staff report. And then I'd also like to just, and I know the ABR will do this anyways, but just have it part of the record to have them really look at the location of the windows to ensure maximum privacy between the...
We went to ABR originally before coming here with this new design, and they were supportive of the project. And there was some discussion about those windows, but the fact that they were really high and that you really can't see out of them, I think...
And we can frost the ones in the kitchen.
addresses much of those concerns, but
Okay.
I get where you're.
It looks like it's going back to full board too, not consent.
Yeah, let's go back to full vote.
Now, in terms of public notice, do they notice the subsequent ABR since they noticed the first one? So what you may want to do is go to the planning counter and ask for you to be notified of the future hearings on this.
I can add her in. I'll make sure she's in there.
Okay, so that you can go to the ABR and express your concerns, because they are valid concerns. They're just what I'm looking at. It's out of that scope, but I am requesting that the ABR look at it, and I know Clay will bring the proposal with the high windows at least forward. Okay? So you approve your project subject to those conditions, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And they also have oversight authority of all my actions, which I know you sat through and heard me say it. So
I might even be able to recite it for you, but I'll let you do it.
Give it a try. No, so if either of those were to occur, Kelly would contact you. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Sure. And that was the last item, so I adjourn the meeting.
Do you need any of this stuff?
Yes, all that you submitted.
Okay, I'll provide that.